The conversation is going to hit. Joining me today is Dr. Irena O'Brien, a cognitive neuroscientist, founder of the Neuroscience School, and someone who's trained hundreds of coaches, psychologists, and leaders on how to use real brain science to drive behavioral change that actually sticks.
Was the worst year for a lot of us for our mental as well as physical health. So joining us this morning is best-selling author, coach Lisa Goldenthal.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa G, your host. You're at the top of your game, yet the game is changing faster than ever. Strategies that got you here aren't the ones that'll keep you here. The pressure is relentless, and the fear of obsolescence looms large. That's why I'm here. Welcome to the new podcast series, Disrupted: How to Be Gritty and Unlock Performance in Business, Mindset, Wellness, and Success to help you master disruption.
Thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon. The conversation is going to hit. Joining me today is Dr. Irena O'Brien, a cognitive neuroscientist, founder of the Neuroscience School, and someone who's trained hundreds of coaches, psychologists, and leaders on how to use real brain science to drive behavioral change that actually sticks. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we're diving into something most leaders overlook completely. You're asking people to perform, change, execute, and lead, but no one ever taught you how the brain actually works. If you've ever had a high performer who knows what to do but still doesn't do it, sound familiar? Welcome, Dr. Irena O'Brien.
Well, thank you for having me on, Lisa. It's so nice to meet you, and I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to
Talk
have
about what
this.
I love.
Go ahead. No, I love this topic myself because, it's almost like one of those things you see every year around New Year's. We all want to change. We all start in January and the changes don't stick. So let's talk about the data. Most leaders assume resistance is a mindset or motivation problem. What is actually happening in the brain when someone knows what to do but still doesn't follow through?
So that's a great question. So I think it helps to start with one basic principle. So contrary to what most people think, the purpose of the brain is not thinking, right? Or emotion or flawless decision making. The purpose of the brain is fundamentally a prediction system. And its purpose is survival and safety. And so it's constantly using past experience to anticipate what's happening, what it means, and what it will cost. And this takes place below the level of consciousness. So if you know what to do, but you're not doing it, it's your predictive brain that has determined that what you want to do is just costing too much for the nervous system. So I can give you an example.
Okay.
Right? One of my own examples. So I have a coach who was encouraging me to develop a certain program and launch it. So I developed it, and then I procrastinated in launching it. Like week after week, I would say, "Well, no, I'll do it next week. Well, I'll start next Monday. No, I'll start next Monday," and it went on and on.
Right.
And then finally, I had a conversation with my mentor. And he looked at my project and he said, "There's too much uncertainty there. Don't do it." And I felt immediate relief.
Wow.
I felt immediate relief. And as I thought about it more, I realized I was never aligned with the project. So it didn't have enough meaning for me. And my brain interpreted that. So the brain is constantly measuring the energetic cost of whatever it is that you want to do. And it determined that cost was just too high. And it had me procrastinate.
Wow. Thanks for sharing a concrete example because we all have those projects somewhere on our to-do list that we think we should do. So having a mentor is so important, isn't it? Just to see if it was actually something you even wanted to do.
It's true. Yeah, it really is. And I kept thinking, oh, I just have a problem with uncertainty. But it was deeper than that. It was really because the uncertainty came from a lack of meaning.
Right. Well, it doesn't always work in your favor though, does it? Like the amygdala hijack when, your old dinosaur brain is thinking, well, this isn't safe, but can you share an example of when that doesn't work in your favor too?
Well, sorry, but this did not work in my favor in the sense that I kept procrastinating. Right?
Oh,
So it
okay.
wasn't, I kept, yeah, it wasn't working in my favor until my mentor pointed out that there was too much uncertainty. But in the meantime, I mean, that can happen with anyone who wants to roll out a project, who wants to make a decision, and they're having a hard time with the decision or the project. Their brain is protecting them, right?
Right,
Because the brain's primary purpose is safety and survival. And
right.
so
But
it's
aren't there,
constantly anticipating
yeah.
how much energy you're going to need.
Does it ever, what I meant by my question was more like, are there any instances you can think of where sometimes it's something you should do and your brain's protecting you, but you don't need the protection?
The brain is
Okay.
always protecting you.
This is so good to know. Thanks for the distinction there. I always wasn't aware of that. So thank you. I'm learning so much, Irina, already. And I want to jump into another topic, which is another huge topic if you think about January 2 and resolutions. If willpower is the wrong layer, what should leaders focus on instead when they're trying to drive behavior change, let's say across a team?
So across a team, you will often see resistance, and you think it's resistance, but it
Right,
is really their brains are trying to protect them, right? So if an organization is rolling out a big change, right, there's a lot of uncertainty for the team,
right,
right? And they knew how to do their jobs, and now they're asked to do something different. So that's a threat, right, to the system because they don't know
right,
whether they will be good at doing it the new way. And then
right.
often they're asked to do it the new way on top of the work that they already have to do. So
Oh.
their system resists. And so it's not resistance in the sense of not wanting to do it. It's that their system is protecting them.
So interesting. Well, what if, I mean, change is always scary for everyone, but what if it's initiative that has to be driven forward? Is there a different way to try to get a team to move forward with change, if it has to absolutely be done?
It depends on how, I mean, there are many things. So it depends on how quickly it has to be done. But I think if you want to bring your team along, you really have to be mindful of their nervous systems and how their nervous systems are protecting them. Right? So that's an awareness thing for CEOs, right? For leadership.
Right.
So to make it as easy as possible for your team to implement those changes.
Yeah. Where they don't feel like it's going to be piling on top of an already maxed out workload.
Exactly. One of my favorite things to do is when I have a huge workload is to break it down into small tasks because
Right.
the very small tasks are not scary. A big task is scary, and your nervous system is going to fight it. Right? But if
Right.
you break it down into a small task, you can usually let that slip through.
I agree. That's such a great point too. And oftentimes, leaders don't have the kind of empathy that you described of thinking in somebody else's mind, like if this is going to be scary for them and sort of walking them through small steps to get this change done.
I know that, but I think that that's a non-negotiable.
Empathy,
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. Let's say you're a CEO listening right now, and what is one practical way they can start working with the brain, not against it, to actually improve their execution and their performance immediately?
So I don't know if you're familiar with the iceberg model of brain function. So above the waterline, icebergs, most of the iceberg is below the waterline, right? Below the
Right.
surface. So above the waterline are your behavior and are your results. And below the waterline is your thinking, your feelings, your emotions, all of that. And right at the very bottom is your physiology. And that is one of the biggest slices in there is your physiology. So it goes back to basics: diet, exercise, and sleep. If if CEOs are not getting enough sleep, they are not going to be at their best. Their nervous systems are going to be on high alert, right? They're going to be easily triggered. And the thing is that, and so another thing I want to say is that we regulate each other's nervous systems. And what that means is that your team is aware of your nervous system even before you open your mouth. So they already know what your nervous system is like and
Yeah,
whether it will be friendly and supportive or not.
I agree. I've seen this firsthand with leaders doing it all wrong, where
Yes,
they have this negative toxic energy and they don't realize how contagious that is and how whole decisions can get made in teams just based on the leader's mood and energy that they're projecting.
exactly. Exactly. They don't even have to say a word, and
And
people already know.
and so the nonverbal communication is there, or is it deeper than that?
It's deeper than that. Yeah, it's like nervous system to nervous system.
So it's like
We
when
just pick it up.
you walk into a room and you just feel this toxic nervous energy and it can intimidate you if you're a direct report and you're feeling like, oh no, this is going to be one of those dealing with a dinosaur confrontational kind of days.
Yes, yes, exactly. Also, it's part of it's from past experience. So if you've had past negative experience with that person, right, then your brain is going to predict that this experience coming up is also going to be negative because that's been your experience.
And what about those leaders that aren't willing to change, that are still leading by, command and control and being stressful and toxic? Do you have any kind of suggestions on what if you have to deal with somebody like that?
That's a real tough one because I mean, if you have to deal with someone like that and he won't change, if you're able to, I think you have to think about whether you want to stay in that organization,
Right.
right? But I know for many people that's not possible, right? They have to stay where they are. They just kind of have to need to insulate themselves as best as they can. But it creates a toxic work culture. And in toxic work cultures, there's a lot of turnover. So it ends
Right.
up costing the company. I mean, there is good research that shows that that participatory leadership. There's another word for it, and it just slips my mind. But you probably know what it is. Servant leadership, it's also called.
Right.
Those are good for employees, but they're also good for the bottom line
Oh,
because
yeah.
the employees are really are willing to put out.
Absolutely. They're engaged. They're not like
Yes,
secretly
yes,
refreshing their LinkedIn page, trying to find something better. So
yes,
I find it so easy to talk to you about this topic because on so many levels, I mean, the damage can be done to the employee in the direct report that lasts for a long time when you've had bosses like that, right?
yes. And it takes a long time to rebuild trust.
So it's trauma.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, it can lead to trauma. I think there is some research now about that toxic workplaces can lead to trauma. I had a conversation with a psychologist a little while ago, and her definition of trauma is anyone who is in a chronic state of stress.
Right.
Yeah.
There are
So
different kinds of traumas, right? If you're like
yes,
big traumas, like car accident, horrible things, and then the kind of damage that can be done. I'm so interested in this topic when you're dealing with toxic, horrible bosses. Like 10 years later, you're like, oh, I had this boss. The opposite is true too. Like 10 years later, you could be like, I had this amazing boss.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's really something I'm passionate about is helping my coaches that I teach to embody this so that they can help change work cultures.
Well, how can you train somebody who, I hate to use a bad word, but let's say has that dinosaur mentality? If you want to help the bottom line of a company, how can you actually bring these dinosaurs along to impress people for good instead of for bad?
I'm not sure what to say about that. I think, yeah, I don't really know how. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to say about that. I mean, they have to want to change, for one, and
Okay.
if they don't realize, um, other than pointing out um, yeah,
Okay. So that's such a good point too. I mean, the dinosaur has to want to change or the tiger has to want to change their stripes. You can't come up to them and say, you have to change.
exactly. But why are they coming to coaching in the first place?
Yeah. They're probably um, wanting to talk about their ego and their wins and not really wanting to do this behavior change. So, is there anything else you want to share with us about behavior change and how to make it last for our audience?
There was another thing that I thought of, and I don't know how related it is. It's about the timing of the day when you make your big decisions, right?
Okay.
So there's an elegant little research study that had uh, two groups of people do tasks for 6.5 hours in the lab for the day. One group did easy tasks and one group did hard cognitive tasks all day long for 6.5 hours. So it resembled a work day. And they also had them periodically during the day make decisions that were easy or hard, and decisions that had immediate reward or later reward. And what they found was that in both groups, neither of them felt that they were fatigued. However, the group that did the hard cognitive work all day long, they tended by the end of the day they were making decisions that were easier and where the reward was immediate.
That makes
And
sense.
yeah, so you really need to be aware of that also, and that's because your nervous system is fatigued. Even if you don't think it is, it's fatigued by the end of the day, and it just doesn't have the capacity to make those good hard decisions anymore.
So, got to eat that frog in the morning for really important decisions.
Exactly.
And is it helpful sometimes to just like work in spurts, like get up in the morning and do work and then take a break if you have to keep grinding for the rest of the day?
Now, that's important to do because the brain just can't do hard cognitive work continually for 6 or 8 hours. It does need a break. Yeah.
My brain definitely does. I know we're all so different, but it's so
Yeah.
wonderful talking to you. I mean, I could just like keep going for hours and hours, but I don't want to go yet. So, do you have any more advice or topics you want to discuss on behavior change and how we can just start small and make actual changes that last?
Yeah. So yeah. So one of the important thing is to remember about the predictive brain, right? So the brain predicts everything,
Right.
right? All decisions. And the brain is built on past experience. So all of your past experiences are in there, and that's what your brain has learned. And so yeah, and that's what your brain has learned. And so when it comes to making any kind of a decision, the brain kind of asks itself, oh, and also the brain, the purpose is safety, right? And survival. And the
Right.
brain kind of asks itself, last time I was in a similar position, what did I do? Okay, I'm going to do that again. And it's going to keep on. And so that's why people know what to do, but they're still not doing it because their predictive brain is constantly predicting the same thing until you start to change it. And the reason it does that is because it thinks if you've been alive this long, your brain thinks I've been doing the right thing. I've kept you alive, and that's my purpose.
So can you override that if need be?
So you have to start pushing the envelope a little bit, right? And not too much at a time because you don't want to scare or freak out your nervous system. So you just keep pushing a little bit so that you can start to soften the edges and do more. Because if and in fact it's important to do that because if you don't, then your brain could predict you right into a straitjacket, right? Imagine that.
No, that would not be good.
No. And I think a lot of people live in that.
Okay. Well, nobody wants that. And you want to be able to gently override your brain if it's trying to protect you, but you really need to push the
Yes.
envelope a little
Because
bit.
to override it costs energy, and the brain is also wants to conserve energy. So it'll let you do small changes without freaking out. But I'm saying small changes, but the size of the change is really dependent on the person, right? We all have different capacities for change.
Yeah. Well, if people want to find out more about your programs, Irena O'Brien, where can they find you?
I have a couple of gifts for your audience. Is that okay?
Of course. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah. So what I put together is called the Applied Neuroscience Starter Kit. And it's for anyone whose work involves helping people change, so such as coaches, therapists, and practitioners, and anyone who wants to bring a real science into the way they do that. And most of us were never taught the neuroscience. What we learned frameworks and we learned questions to ask, but nobody ever explained what the brain is actually doing when someone tries to change. And that's not your fault. It simply wasn't in the training. So what I have is this. The first piece is the neuroscience of why clients get stuck. And it gives you 10 insights into what's actually happening when someone understands what they need to do but can't seem to do it. Why willpower fails, why insight isn't enough, and what the nervous system needs instead. And each one comes with something you can use in your next session. And the second piece is the brain-based change blueprint. And that shows you the 3 conditions that have to be present before change becomes possible. And that's safety, capacity, and small repeated steps. And we've just talked about that. And it's the same framework I've taught to over 700 practitioners over the past decade. And so if you work with people who keep falling back into old patterns, this will show you why and what to do about it. And so you can just go to loveneuroscience.com/CEO and you'll get both pieces immediately. So that's loveneuroscience.com/CEO.
Well, I'm going there to get my own. So thank you so much, Dr. Irena O'Brien, for being a great guest.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Lisa. And if you have any questions, just reach out.
I will. I'll have my audience do so.